Welcome to the Start Something Show. Join world-renowned experts, change agents, and everyday folks who have done the amazing. All here to help you start something incredible. Now it's time to step out, live your perfect day, and create a legacy with your host, Tina Dietz.
Hello and welcome to the Backstage Pass. I'm Tina Dietz and welcome Super Starters. We are here today with Maria Pascucci, who is a fabulous transformational coach, speaker. She speaks at college campuses and other stages all around the country. She is highly, highly committed to helping highly sensitive people embrace their sensitivity as one of their greatest assets. And she's owned multiple companies and really helps people embrace who they are, especially women. But guys, don't feel bad. You can listen in too. And there are some highly sensitive men out there as well who need support too. So Maria, welcome back to the show and to the Backstage Pass.
Thank you. I'm really excited for this portion of the interview.
Yeah. I know you love to teach and train, so we're gonna dig right in. Why don't we start by having you kind of share what you mean by highly sensitive and how do people know if they are?
Sure. Well, so if you go to my website, the mariapascucci.com, there's actually a quiz that you can take, are you sensitive? And you can take the quiz and find out, just how sensitive are you? Basically, there's so much debate back and forth in the academic community on what is highly sensitive and are you an empath and are you sensitive? And, for me, I really just like to keep it simple. And if you have grown up your whole life hearing, God, you're such a drama queen. You're so emotional. You're so sensitive. Stop being such a girl. Stop being such a baby. You most likely are sensitive. Do you intuitively know that you are sensitive? Some other things. Can you walk into a room and immediately just feel the vibe? If you are hanging around people who are extremely positive and excited, do you tend to absorb their positive energy and begin to soar right along with them? And then if you walk into a room and there's a lot of what I call catabolic energy and a lot of, just
yuck,
anger or sadness, yuck, that's a good word for it. Do you have a tendency to absorb that and find yourself getting drained really quickly, by that? And what I found in my research too is that a lot of people who are highly sensitive and, it's interesting, as I was looking at how do I want to begin to branch out from Campus Calm, and, I was thinking to myself, how do I want to do this? Because I want to help people in the health and wellness realm. And I myself had all of these different food allergies and all these different women's health issues. And I was like, where's the missing piece? How does this all connect? And then when I started doing research on sensitive people and empaths, it clicked for me because I saw that a lot of people who are really sensitive just have all these kind of bizarre, unexplained health issues, especially, by the Western medical community where you just don't know what's going on. So once that kind of clicked for me, I just realized it's okay, sensitive bodies, sensitive minds, sensitive souls. And it really was kind of like this light bulb moment. And I started to, then gravitate, to that space because I really felt called to serve there. And I wanted to, just be able to use my experiences and my stories as a way to connect with and help other highly sensitive people, and in particular women.
Mm-hmm. And you say being sensitive can be our greatest asset. So how does being sensitive enhance what we're out doing in the world?
Yeah. For me, I'm trained in a coaching process. It's called core energy coaching, energy leadership. And basically, it's 7 levels of leadership or consciousness, if you will, depending on who you're talking to.
Yes, exactly.
Some people, if you say 7 levels of energy and consciousness, they're like, what? So you say 7 levels of leadership.
Then it's okay again. Yes.
Then it's okay. But essentially, there's 7 levels of energy or consciousness, and 2 of those energy levels are considered catabolic and draining to the body, which means that in order for that energy to grow, it takes away from our body. So it can be conflict, anxiety, feeling like you're at the effect of your life, that sort of thing. And then each level of energy or consciousness gets progressively more anabolic, which is healing and growth oriented. So learning how to tap into those higher levels of energy that highly sensitive people already have within them, which is being really connected to your intuition and, leading with unconditional love and compassion. The way to get to those levels of energy and lead with them as an asset is, in many cases, it's by releasing and removing all of the catabolic junk that, is on top of that and gets in the way of it.
Wow. Okay, great. And then as that happens, then what tends to unfold?
What tends to unfold is, I am in coaching calls with women who are just so highly intuitive and so powerful. I'll do a deep centering exercise with them and a guided visualization. And then what comes out of them is just beautiful. And it's amazing and it's heart-centered and it's so powerful. And I think sometimes that they surprise themselves. And it's just, I think for a lot of highly sensitive people, we have these high levels of intuition and we can access them, but a lot of times we don't trust it because all of that catabolic energy, the fear and the doubt, from past experiences, from, a very coachy term, from limiting beliefs and all that stuff, it just kind of like gets in the way of leading with our gifts as highly sensitive people.
Yeah, and if we really could embrace all of that as a gift, boy, would that make life a whole lot easier for so many of us and most entrepreneurs are so passionate about what they do. I'd be really interested to know if the average entrepreneur or self-employed person tends to be more sensitive. I wonder if that's the case. It would be a cool study to do for sure.
It would be a cool study to do. And and it's interesting too, because the whole like energy attracts like energy. I mean, when I look back to all of the years that I spent in Campus Calm and the college market, my interns, the women who I connected with, without giving them like some formal test to figure it out, they all struck me as highly sensitive people. I just didn't have a term for it back then.
That makes sense. Like does attract like. Well, let's turn our attention to something related to sensitivity, but something that even if don't consider yourself highly sensitive can definitely happen. And that's the topic of overwhelm. And you and I were talking a little bit before our recording here today about how common it has become to have this sense of, significant overwhelm. And there's a lot of health impacts. There's a lot of emotional impacts to the state of overwhelm. How do we work with it?
Yeah. And overwhelm is huge. In the general, it's funny. I posted a Facebook post about, being a highly sensitive person and some tips to deal with overwhelm. And people were commenting and saying, I don't think I'm a highly sensitive person, but I completely get what you're saying about overwhelm because I experience it all the time. So it's not like you have to be highly sensitive to get overwhelmed. But
yeah,
I think,
for sure.
But I think that when you are highly sensitive, it can get magnified. So, when you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed out, I say to clients, I ask them, I said, okay, so what do you do automatically without even thinking about it? And, here's some common things that people might do when they get overwhelmed or stressed. They might light up a cigarette. They might go for a run. They might hop on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn and just kind of, zone out on social media. They might check their email, eat a row of Oreos. They might pick a fight with their significant other. Some, me, watch a chick flick, have a good cry, uncork a favorite bottle of wine, call a girlfriend and vent, or they can shut their door and meditate for a few minutes, or they can go shopping, have a little retail therapy. And what highly sensitive people can also do, you can beat yourself up. You can just kind of say things like, God, stop being so sensitive. What's wrong with you? Get a grip, toughen up. Why can't you handle this better? Or you can turn off all the lights, you can climb into bed and throw the covers over your head.
I would say I have participated in all of the above at one time or another.
I think we all have.
Yes. You're talking and I'm going, check. Yep. It happens.
So, there's a chart, and I can actually, I can send this to you that you can share, with all of the listeners.
That would be great.
It's a worksheet that I'm looking at right now. So there's a chart where you can list what you do in times of stress or overwhelm. And then there's 2 boxes that you can check off. So one is, does this activity eat a row of Oreos? Does this activity provide short-term relief? Well, yes, because, it helps you deal with the
Oreos.
Right. And it helps you deal with the stress in the moment. And then, the last column is, okay, does it provide long-term benefits? And here's the thing. Only you know the answer that is right for you. I'm not going to tell you, you can't eat that because that's not good for you. You intuitively make that choice. So, what do? Do you shut your door and meditate for a few minutes? Does that provide long-term relief? And how about long-term benefits? So, I always say to my sensitive clients just to imagine for the next month that you get to choose to respond to stress in ways that provide both short-term relief and long-term benefits. And what would be different about your life? And then what would be different about how you feel about yourself as a sensitive person? And then how would you feel different about your ability to lead yourself and then others towards positive action? And, at the end of the day, no matter what choice you make, how about giving yourself permission to feel good about whatever you choose? Like, no more beating yourself up about, any of the choices that you're making.
That would be really great, wouldn't it?
It would be lovely.
Yeah, and that's a discipline. It's absolutely discipline, just like, choosing the meditation over the Oreos.
Right.
Although, I could probably figure out a way to chant the word Oreo and, incorporate it into the meditation. But I don't know if that's going to, definitely still not a long-term benefit. What are some of your favorite ways that you've developed? Because you have a very strong discipline in eating really well, taking good care of yourself, that I highly admire. So what have you done yourself to some favorite ways to cope with those times of overwhelm or negative self-talk?
Yeah. So when it comes to the negative self-talk, I practice mindfulness. So of course there are times when you're on autopilot and you're not even realizing what it is that you're thinking. But as soon as I find myself starting to get overwhelmed, I stop and I say to myself, all right, what's going on? What is running through your head right now that is causing you to feel this overwhelm? And I actually, I talk to myself out loud, because when I do that, I actually stop thinking and I start listening. So if I just start thinking like, what am I thinking? Well, it just doesn't work for me. So once I do that, I'm usually able to see really quickly that the thought patterns that I'm having are leading me toward a place of overwhelm. And then I can jump in and I can, coach myself essentially. Well, really, how true is that for you? And what's another way to look at that? And, just kind of like reframe it in such a way that it's empowering me instead of, making me feel like crap.
Developing voices in your head that actually work for you, right? Work on your behalf.
Right, exactly. And in my TEDx talk, I talk about how I named my inner gremlin, and I call her Perfectoria. So, I would just say to myself out loud sometimes, all right, Perfectoria, what's going on? And, whatever's coming up is what's coming up.
I could not agree more. I have years ago, I did some inner family work, which is a deep therapeutic work. I was on the receiving end of it, and I was having mental board meetings there for a while. Occasionally still have one, very distinct personalities and all of that. And I think once I also decided do you remember the character Madison Frog from Looney Tunes, the singing and dancing frog?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, that little guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had some persistent, we were talking about limiting beliefs and negative self-talk. And I was doing some research on that. And what I found was that, and I know you're familiar with this as well, that with negative self-talk, if you try to kind of just butt up against it, the resistance comes back stronger. So having the conversations like you were talking about, where you start to question it and actually pick it apart and, pull the logic out is far more effective. Another effective method is actually to throw some humor at it.
Yeah.
And I remember reading this one article and this guy talking about things he was saying to himself, and he would say back to himself, I bet you can't say that in French. Or, stuff like that would kind of short circuit that cycle. And so going back to Medicine Frog, the whole tape in your head, and I think it was something along the lines of you're fat, you're ugly, and nobody loves you. Yeah. And it was like this mental image of all this kick line of Madison Frog singing that. And it was just so completely absurd that it short circuited the tape, the mental tape and the thought. Or the mental MP3. I shouldn't date myself like that. But yeah, we get really creative when we get determined that we're just not going to have these things in our way anymore, don't we?
Yes, very much so. And, and I lean on friends, and I have, it's a beautiful thing about being a coach. You have this big circle of coaches. So, we coach each other back and forth sometimes. And my husband is, he's a godsend. He is the most mellow, laid back, resilient man that I know. So I get to absorb some of his calming energy. And then there are times where he's just like, Maria, go do a yoga video and come back in a half an hour.
Nice. Well done, sir.
Exactly.
That's well done. And okay, so I want to switch gears for just a second and kind of like total 360 here, because we mentioned in the show and now in the backstage pass that you did a TEDx talk. And it's a really great talk. For those of you who haven't seen it, you need to go back to the website at the Start Something show and click the link to get to Maria's TEDx video because it's super cool. I would love, a lot of folks who are listening are self-employed, are speakers, coaches, professionals of different kinds, and really curious about that process and that experience. What was the experience of, first of all, how did you develop your proposal for it? And then secondly, what was it like to actually be on that TEDx stage?
Yeah, so how it worked was I received an email inviting me to submit a 2-minute video on the topic of Invented Here, which was the theme for, TEDx Women. And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm a coach, I'm a speaker, what's my background? What does this have to do with invented here? Like, I'm not an inventor in the traditional sense. And then it sort of hit me, invented here, your self-worth. So I put together a 2-minute video and, sent it off to the committee, and then I was selected to lead a TEDx talk. And the process of from the time I was selected until the time I was standing on that TEDx stage was one of the more challenging and one of the more transformative experiences in my professional career. And the reason why was the women on the committee who I was, paired off with, and I had mentor coaches, they were adamant about me. If I was going to talk about not being a perfectionist on that stage, then I could not be a perfectionist. And I had to get really, really real and go deeper with my audience than I ever have before. And that brought up a lot of stuff for me, and it scared me to death. And by the time I got there to that TED stage the day before, we had a dress rehearsal, and it was just, I got to see for myself how incredibly powerful it was to be so authentic and so open. So that by the time that I stood there on the TED stage for the actual event, it was such a transformational experience. And I remember, afterwards just feeling so uplifted myself and, receiving like text messages the second I got off the stage from people who know me very well, just saying like, oh my God, like that was the most open and honest and authentic and beautiful speech I've ever seen you deliver. And so much so that Brene Brown, she was one of my favorite TED speakers, The Power of Vulnerability. I would experience the next day what Brene Brown calls the vulnerability hangover. I woke up the next morning And I just like laid in bed with the covers over my head for probably 15 minutes. And I was like, oh my God, I just did that on the TED stage in front of like everyone. And now it's going to go on YouTube and everybody's going to see it.
What have I done?
Right.
Yeah.
What have I done? But then I was like, okay, it's done and it's out there and this is a good thing. And then I just started to roll with it.
You did, and you recovered quickly because I remember you being just so excited when it came out on the video, and you were like, look, 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 look. And
Right.
I was like, yay! It was so exciting. And it was extremely well received and continues to be well watched. So I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. And I didn't know inside of the TEDx process that those mentor coaches were there.
Yep.
That's cool.
It's very cool. Very cool. And I'm very grateful to all of them, even when in the moment I was like internally kicking and screaming.
Yes, that's very true. And that's the power of coaching. It's pulling us forward into those areas we probably wouldn't go ourselves.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, dear, for joining us today. We're going to start to wind down into just a couple of our questions here we always want to leave our listeners with. And one is, for those our super starters out there who are fighting the good fight on the path and on the journey to starting something in their lives, what are 3 things that they could go and do this week to continue their journey to start something that you'd recommend?
To start something that I would recommend.
Well, what could they do to help them on their start something journey? 3 actions they could take this week.
Okay. They can begin by finding one person in their life who they know is somebody who is going to support them and, be a cheerleader for them in the beginning and really help them to open up and, have a safe space to share, what it is that they want to start in a supportive environment. That could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a colleague, it could be a coach, whatever that, person is for you. Let's see, something else. Well, depending on what it is that you want to start, I would say, if you want to start something, first ask yourself some really good questions, empowering questions like, okay, so if I had to start just one thing that really can be a reflection of the type of legacy that I would want to leave, for the world this year, what might that be? Everything that I've experienced in my life thus far, what is it that I feel most called to share with the world? Asking yourself some really good questions to kind of get at the heart of things instead of, I think a lot of people, they want to start something, but they oftentimes don't know exactly what to start or what it is that they really, really want to start. They feel afraid to start that. So then they start something that they feel like they should start, or somebody else thinks that they should start, that sort of thing. So really making sure, doing a check-in with yourself and assessing to see if this is something that you really, truly want and not something that you feel like you need or you should be doing.
Brilliant. Yeah, really, really good advice. Really good advice. And it's funny that you touched on legacy because that's always my final question here. And what is the legacy that you want to leave?
Yeah. So it's interesting so for the college market, the legacy that I wanted to leave for them was to have them be empowered to know that they're more than the measure of their grade point average. They're more than the measure of their GPA or their GRE scores or the title on their business cards or the size of their jeans, and that they truly are enough. And I think that transitioning, into this market of highly sensitive people and connecting with them, it really is a similar message that, you are more than the measure of what you do and what you accomplish in life. And that ultimately it's who you are on the inside, that really matters. And if you lead with, the core of who you are, then that is so incredibly powerful. And other people are going to gravitate toward that.
leading with the core of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. I always enjoy. You are like a ray of light any time that you are in a room. And thank you so much for joining us on the show and on the Backstage Pass. Did you have a good time?
Oh, I did so much. I always love talking with you.
We always have a good time. And super starters, take this advice to heart, put it in action, and we will see you next time on the Backstage Pass of the Start Something Show.